And a honey trap caught on CCTV. The two bears who escaped and devoured a week's worth of honey at a wildlife park in Devon. Now meet Mish and Lucy, two young bears who live in a wildlife park in Devon after being rescued from a snowdrift in the Albanian mountains. Well, yesterday they had a brief adventure when they managed to escape their enclosure. They spent their hour of freedom tucking into snacks, including devouring a week's worth of honey, before being safely returned to their home. Duncan Kennedy is in Ottery St Mary with the bears.
Yes, Sophie, you're looking at live shots of Mish and Lucy, probably the two most famous bears in the country at the moment. And you've guessed it, they're still eating. But at least this time, they're in the confines of their own pen, unlike before when they snuck out and went in search of what bears love the most.
Mid-afternoon and the great honey heist is in full flow. Caught on security cameras, the furtive operation sees the two bears out of their enclosure. It doesn't take long for them to find the kitchen, and inside these containers they scoop out all that lovely honey. A week's ration scoffed in seconds.
Mish, Lucy!
And here are the guilty pair, Mish and Lucy, brother and sister, two very satisfied brown bears.
How do they find the honey and how much of it do they eat?
They've got an incredible sense of smell, bears. The fact that they gorge themselves on a fresh food delivery, you couldn't make it up, could you? It's bears' food. They're synonymous with wanting to eat pretty much whatever they want, and then finding the honey. It was the feather in the cap, really.
It's not known how they snuck out. The police were called, but no one was hurt.
Well, the two bears are looking a bit sheepish today after their unscheduled escapade. And for the next few days, they've been put on a special honey-free diet.
Mish and Lucy were rescued from Romania when their mother rejected them. Now aged 5, these two hungry hulks are back in their enclosure, their stomachs full.
They've had all their necessities.
They're not having they've had all their necessities and they're having no more honey, I can confirm that.
The Great Bear breakout only lasted a few minutes, but like the honey, this small taste of freedom is likely to leave the sweetest of memories. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News, at the Wildwood Park in Devon.
The honey trap.
Now, when two brown bears escaped from their enclosure at a wildlife park in Devon, their keepers didn't have to look too far. Mish and Lucy made straight for the honey store and quickly scoffed a week's worth of food. Now the brother and sister are safely back in their enclosure and are said to be very happy, as our correspondent Ben Chapman reports.
It turns out it's not just storybook bears who are obsessed with honey, but it would appear that Mish and Lucy are just a bit more savvy than Winnie the Pooh. Yesterday, finding a way out of their enclosure and into their keeper's storage hut. Rooting around with just one thing on their minds, or at least in their nostrils, these young bears went straight for the sweet stuff. A week's worth of honey, according to the staff here.
They ignored all the beneficial items like the root vegetables and the cauliflower and went straight for apples, bananas, and then of course found the honey store, which they made a beeline for and largely decimated.
How much did they get through?
Too much for a young bear.
It was when one of them was spotted in an area normally accessible only to their keepers that the park was evacuated and staff trained in firearms were deployed. But in the end, it wasn't really necessary. Despite all of their newfound freedom, they didn't require terribly much persuasion to come back into their enclosure. Mish, having eaten his fill, simply walked back in and fell asleep. Lucy was coaxed back shortly afterwards with a bell and more of her favourite food. The park's owners say at no point could the bears enter public areas, but an investigation's underway into how they broke free.
We focus very much on the positive element, great, but we also have to think, this is something we don't ever want to happen again, and reassure the local people who I incidentally have to say have been amazing. We just received a £100 donation for honey, which we're very grateful for.
But back safely behind bars, these two treat thieves are having vegetables for the next few days at least. Ben Chapman, ITV News, Devon.